We're talking about a vow. That's what I want to share with you tonight. And so when you think of weddings, right? Of course, you think of one of the most beautiful things that a bride and a groom do together is when they share their vows with one another. I want to give you, though, kind of a definition. I always like starting off with what are the terms we're using, and let's get a picture so we're on the same page. So definition of a vow: a solemn promise or promise to do a specific thing, an oath, pledge, bond, covenant, commitment. The archaic meaning of a vow is actually a dedication to someone or something, and normally it's especially to a deity. It's making a vow to a deity. So we see this. We see these wedding vows, and I'm just going to read from my Christian minister's manual. That's what you get when you get licensed. It's like, here you go. It's like all that work, and everything's in here that you need. But it is. It's a great book. Survive on it. But this is a marriage vow. I just did a wedding. I'm going to read to you, and those of you who are married or have been in a lot of weddings or seen them and witnessed them, you heard this. But let's just hear these vows. These are traditional vows. The bride and groom. I so-and-so take you so-and-so to be my wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do us part. As God is my witness, I give you this promise. We see this in those ceremonies. Something very special is taking place. These are promises of faithfulness. They're promises of unconditional love. Unconditional love. It's not based on situations or on the other person. It's saying, I'm going to choose to love you unconditionally. It's also based on a commitment. From a man to a woman, it's a commitment saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to commit to love you no matter what we're going to encounter. Before anything even happens, before the sickness, before being poor, before all that, I'm making this commitment to you, this vow, to love you, to be by your side. And these vows are things, like I said, they extend beyond our experiences, our conditions, our environments. They're promises that we make to one another. And I pray that all of you get to experience that day where you look at your husband or your wife and you make these beautiful vows to one another. But see, it also connects me to look at something different. I see vows, yes, in marriage, but also throughout the whole Old Testament and New Testament, individuals are making vows and promises unto God. So I want to walk through the Old Testament vows real quick. You're hearing Old Testament, you're like, oh. Some people already told me, it's been a long week. I might sleep a little bit. I'm like, that's all right. You rest. You rest. I will hit you in the face with this iPad. No, I'm kidding. Really, just rest, sleep. If you start snoring, that's a different story. If you just close your eyes, don't worry. No one's judging you. Biblical meaning of a vow, though, is a voluntary promise someone makes to God. And actually, it literally means binding yourself unto him. Binding yourself unto God. Throughout Scripture, and especially in the Old Testament, we see that. There's specific vows that are made. A vow of abstinence, a Nazirite vow, sacrifices to the Lord, alms, giving to the poor. There's these specific vows that men and women make unto God. And constantly, man is having to function within this law of the Old Testament. The Levitical law. In Deuteronomy, you read more about it, and not just the Ten Commandments. It goes even further than that. And if you've jumped in there, and I'm not going to give you a whole Old Testament lecture here about the law and what that symbolizes, but hear me on it. It was these people, the Israelites, had to be holy, and in order to be holy people, they had to abide by the perimeters of the law. They had to function within that. And so many times, these men and women would make promises unto God. Within these things, I will do this, I will do that. And they were called to fulfill those promises. Psalm 76:11 says this, make vows to the Lord your God and fulfill them. Let all the neighboring lands bring gifts to the one to be feared. Deuteronomy 23:21 says this, if you make a vow to the Lord your God, do not be slow to pay it. For the Lord your God will certainly demand it of you, and you will be guilty of sin. Ecclesiastes 5:4-5 says this, when you make a vow to God, do not delay to fulfill it. He has no pleasure in fools. Fulfill your vow. It is better not to make a vow than to make one and not fulfill it. It's pretty serious stuff. I mean, this is serious stuff. Making a vow to God, and he says, don't be a fool. That meaning you say, I vow this unto you, God, and don't fulfill it. So man had to constantly approach and fulfill these things for God. It was for the motivation was coming from God and his law. So this would sometimes come across, and when we read it from a New Testament perspective, we can kind of say, it seems rigid and very systematic in one's approach unto God. And that's true. It was very systematic. Here's the perimeter. Here's the law. In the Old Testament, here's the law. You approach God in this way. Through man's ability to abide by the law of God, he could find restoration and forgiveness. He had to abide by that. God was always faithful to Israel. He was always faithful to Israel. And constantly throughout Scripture, you'll see that. The Lord talking to Israel. He's staying faithful. But men and women were having to constantly make these commitments unto God, proving their dedication and their faithfulness to him constantly, to make a vow. Didn't mean there wasn't a relationship, but no, they were making a vow. I will fulfill this. I will do that. Men and women approaching God. But see, something is about to take place in the Scriptures. Something is about to happen that changes everything. The whole understanding of even what a vow unto God is. Something eternal. Shatter the cosmos in one sense, because something was about to flip and flop. Do you like that? I don't know if I could do it again. All right. 4 people are like, yeah. Other people are like, can't whistle. Oh, I can whistle. Okay. But something's about to change. See, man had fallen. In Genesis, man and woman are tempted by a serpent, this is symbolizing Satan, the enemy, okay? He's tempting man and woman saying, don't be dependent upon God. They slip up, they fall. They say, we don't need God. They make that decision. In that, something's shattered. And we've talked about that. We're separated from God. That's where the whole institution of the Old Testament law comes into place. And now, that's what's standing before them. Function within this and do that. But in Genesis, God, he makes a vow to humanity. Genesis 3:15. Now he's talking to the enemy here, to Satan, who just tempted and made humanity fall away from the presence of God. God says, and I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. See, God was saying in due time, Adam and his descendants, his race, will be delivered from Satan's rulership and from sin and death. God made a vow. There will be restoration. See, when God makes a promise, like it says in Numbers 23:19, listen to this. God is not human that he should lie. Not a human being that he should change his mind. Does he speak and then not act? Does he promise and not fulfill? What that's saying right there is when God says, I will do something, when he makes a promise, he does not break it. Raise your hand if you've experienced someone who's made a promise to you and they've broken it. I think all of us could say, yep, we relate to that. Humanity's not perfect. You might have even been someone who's made a promise and you broke it. But God says that. Is God not human? That I should lie? He's saying there's a difference between us. God is saying when I make a promise, I fulfill it. I do it. So something almost scandalous was about to take place. He said scandalous. People are like, ooh, what does this mean? So, at least that's what I think. I'm like, scandalous. That's when everyone leaned forward. Huh? Tell me something juicy. Okay. God's about to do something. He's about to act upon a vow he made and promise. He sends Jesus Christ. But listen here. What did I say a vow was? To bind with. Jesus takes on humanity. He's fully God. He takes on, he binds with humanity. becomes fully God and fully man. Oh, that doesn't make sense. It's a mystery, but it's still true. Now something changed. God came to man. Man was approaching God. Man was going to God, making these vows to God, fulfilling what he said. But now suddenly something switched. Now God came to man. He bound himself with us. He bound himself with you and with me. And when Jesus dies and when he raises from the dead, that's where that vow is fulfilled. Back in Genesis, when it says the serpent's head was crushed and God's heel was bruised. It's talking about Jesus. He crushed death. His heel was bruised. The serpent was crushed. The fulfillment of that vow taking place. But see, it goes deeper than that. Because Christ constantly refers to his love for us by showing it in a man and a woman getting married and becoming one. Constantly, the main analogy, if not the only one we see in the New Testament to represent Christ's love for us, is shown as a man and a woman get married and become one flesh. You know, some traditions, they do something. They bind a couple together. Who's Greek in here? Yeah. Hey, we got 4 of them. 5. Anna's family's Greek name is Asimakopoulos. Mark's middle name is Leonidas. That's awesome. Saw it on his passport. I'm like, really? That's awesome. But they have something called Stephana. It's a tradition they do at a wedding, and in that there's 2 crowns, but these crowns are tied together. Symbolize the oneness, that they're being bound together. And this is not in a bad sense, like, oh, ball and chain, like society tries to tell us. Not at all. It's a gift. It's something beautiful. Now, I want to bring up my lovely wife, Anna Joy. Yes, just clap for her. She's awesome. Okay. So, a prime example of this, of Christ and his love for us, the vow he has made to you and me, is seen like in a marriage in many different cultures. When the husband and wife, when they're coming together, they'd put their hands, and we would wrap ourselves, bind ourselves together. We practiced this. Okay? Symbolism, this vow that's being made. We then say our vows to one another. The unity. So now as a husband and a wife, we have a double-headed sweater. We'll bring that one time too. Now as a husband and a wife, right, we've made vows to one another, which shows we're together. So we're walking through life with one another. This relationship has now become one. And it's not bondage. It's not like, oh, get over here and she's pulling me that way. No, it's, okay, let's talk. Which direction are we going? We're going this direction. We're going together. But when Jesus came to you and to me, when he bound himself to humanity, and then he says, I want to make a vow with you. He invites us to this intimacy and this relationship, like a husband and a wife have together. Thanks, babe. No. Yes. Jesus makes promises to us. He says he'll never leave us nor forsake us. His love will never fail. He'll be faithful to us. 2 Timothy 2:11 through 13 says this, he's a trustworthy saying. Listen to this. If we died with him, we also live with him. If we endure, we also reign with him. If we disown him, he will also disown us. But if we are faithless, he will remain faithful, for he cannot disown himself. Our Jesus is so faithful to us. So no more are there distant vows where man is initiating and God is listening. Now God, Jesus, is initiating to us and we're listening. Now that choice is there for us. That's what we term as a big term, salvation. Jesus is saying, I wish to make a vow with you, this relationship with you. God initiating with us, we have the opportunity to listen and to act. I'm going to ask the band to head back up here. So I kind of just close this down. You know, that's our moment where we become one with Christ. And many of you in this room, you say, I've done that before. You know, I'm living this relationship with Christ. But there's something else, and this is what I really felt in my heart. There's something else that God's been, I think, calling out on us, is the vows and the promises that we've made to him. See, in our journey with God and life, we've made vows, commitments unto God. I'll do this. I want to do this, Lord. We've said these things. And I'm not talking about, please hear me, I'm not talking about ridiculous vows. Lord, I promise I'll fast for 7 months and I'll have 1 glass of water, every 3 days because that's all my body needs. I'm not talking about ridiculous vows or things that you say, God, I'll do, and you have to check your heart on it so that others see you do it. It's not legalistic just to say, I did these things and now good, I'm good before the Lord. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about the fact that when we look at marriage, we say what? Well, it's initiated by one. I got on my knee and I said, Anna, will you marry me? I initiated that on my own. But then from that second when she said yes, it became a relationship of two. And we both had to equally work at that covenant and that commitment that we made. In Psalm 116, 12 through 14 says this. It says, how can I repay the Lord for all his goodness to me? I will lift up the cup of salvation and call on the name of the Lord. I will fulfill my vows to the Lord in the presence of all his people. Have you made promises to God and there's been no fulfillment of them yet? Have you made promises and vows unto God in your life that were so real and so authentic in the moment? I was reading through my journal 2 or 3 days ago, and this is where this whole thing sparked from. And I was reading something that was written years ago. And I've been walking through some difficulties in my own heart lately, and just seeing a friend of mine who fought cancer and he lost that fight. He passed away. Man of faith who inspires me to live every day to the fullest. But seeing those things, it can't help but bring up feelings and emotions and times where you have to walk through questions. And I'm sitting there, I'm reading my journal, and suddenly something I wrote 3-4 years ago, walking through another difficult thing, I see it and I read it. And I began to weep. I said, Lord, I made you that promise, that vow, that I'd still run the race, that I'd keep on keeping on. I'm going to continue to fulfill that. I'm going to continue to do that. See, vows are only words spoken until they're called into action. Then they become the reality of a promise. Vows are only words spoken until they are called into action, and then they become the reality of a promise. God's calling you out. And maybe you need to be reminded. I had an idea of a whole thing, a series we were going to go through and all this, but I felt like the Lord said, no, tonight I want to remind my children of the promises they made to me, of vows that they made unto me, that have still not yet been fulfilled. The question is, what happened? Did you discount that? Those things that the Lord once spoke deep to your soul, have you discounted that? I wasn't really experiencing him. It wasn't even real. You might say that. It really wasn't even real. Like, I was just very emotional. I wasn't thinking logical. I made this promise unto God from my heart. And I'm talking about biblical truths here. I'm not talking about things that are making promises outside of who God is and his will. Hear me. But you look at that and you're like, it wasn't real. And you've discounted that. A true experience you had in your heart with the Lord. Maybe you became disillusioned. Something didn't play out like you planned it to. So now you even question God's faithfulness. Just didn't happen like I thought it was. I don't know. You look back at that moment and you say, you know what, it doesn't really matter. It's not what I thought it would be. It's just a silly thing. It's stupid anyway. Who even makes promises unto God? Who even does that now? That's such an Old Testament thing. That's such like a on the mountainside, scream out, I vow to do this, and then epic. I don't live a epic enough life to do those types of things. So I'm just going to forget about that little chapter in my journal. So you just discard it. You purposely choose to forget that. Because maybe you said, you know what, I also realized I made a promise to God, but it demanded something of me that I wasn't ready yet to give, that I didn't feel capable of giving. So I'm just going to leave that by the wayside. I've gotten too busy. Oh, those are childish things. I was 15 years old and I wrote something down in my journal because I had an experience with God, and childish. You became discouraged. You tried to do those things and you failed at them. Yeah, we fail as humans. And you just said, forget it. Well, tonight, hear from the heart of God. I think He's saying something to us. He's reminding us, reminding you the promises you made to Him. What does that look like? I don't know. Lord, I promise that the gift and talent that I have, I'll use it for your kingdom. I promise you, God, I'll use it for your kingdom. I play guitar so well, and I promised you I'd use it, but life's gotten carried away. Oh, Lord, I promise I'll go to the nations. I said that to you, I will go to the nations. But yet that person next to you in that cubicle who's from India, you haven't even gone to them. We're all getting called out. This is uncomfortable, yeah. In my own life as well. That's because He loves us. He's calling us out. What are the promises you made? See, we know God is faithful. We need to ask ourselves something. Oswald Chambers said this in My Utmost for His Highest devotional. Are we faithful to Jesus or faithful to our ideas about Him? Are we faithful to Jesus or our ideas about Him? My friend Austin Helm asked me when I was starting to kind of like Anna, and I said, I like this girl, Anna Grothy. He said, Stephen, do you like the idea of Anna Grothy or do you like Anna Grothy? I said, I don't know. He said, you better find that out. And I did. I love Anna Grothy. Not just the idea or the things I thought or expectation. No, her, the person. We need to be faithful to Him. Realize Christ, He's made a vow to you and me, and He has fulfilled it. He's fulfilled that vow to us. He's tied Himself to us. We've been bound to Him in love and intimacy in that relationship. And maybe you've felt faithless in those promises, but now's your chance. The reminder's happening. Pick up your journal. Look at those promises you made God. Begin to live them. Begin to fulfill them. Let's stand together. And at this time, I just invite you. Search your heart. And God doesn't come to condemn us. Please hear me. This is not a message of condemnation at all. This is exciting. He loves you so much. He loves you so much. That relationship with you. He's saying you've made promises. Will you fulfill them for me? Like I look at my wife and she looks at me. Hard times have come. We're walking through those very things we talked about. We vowed to one another in that church on that day when we got married. But now it's saying, hey, are we going to live this out? Are we going to do this? Are we going to fulfill those promises we made? So as you worship now, search your heart. Search your heart. Lord, you're calling me out. I'll answer you. I'll fulfill those vows I made to you.